Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal of the temporal laboratory's main console, her dark eyes reflecting the cascade of data streaming across the holographic displays. The year was 2157, and humanity had finally cracked the secret of temporal observation, not travel, but the ability to peer through the fabric of time like looking through windows into the past. "The readings are impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the quantum processors. Her research partner, Dr. James Chun, looked up from his workstation, concern etched across his weathered face. "What kind of impossible?" James asked, abandoning his analysis of 20th century climate data to join Elena at the central display. Elena's fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up temporal signatures from various points in Earth's history. "Look at this pattern. Every major human-made disaster from the past 3 centuries, Chernobyl, Bhopal, the Great Pacific Waste Convergence of 2089, even the resource wars of the 2040s, they're all connected by these quantum echoes." The display showed a web of interconnected energy signatures, pulsing like a neural network across the timeline. Each disaster site glowed with an eerie blue light, connected by streams of temporal energy that seemed to flow backwards through time. That's not possible," James breathed, his scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before his eyes. "Temporal echoes don't work that way. Events can't influence their own past." Elena's heart raced as she isolated one particularly strong signal. Unless they're not echoes at all. What if they're warnings? The laboratory fell silent except for the soft whir of cooling systems. Outside, the reinforced windows, the rebuilt city of New Geneva stretched toward the horizon, its bio-integrated architecture a testament to humanity's hard-learned lessons about sustainability. Solar collectors gleamed like scales on building facades, while vertical gardens turned every structure into a living ecosystem. "Elena," James said slowly, his voice heavy with implication, "if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, we need to be very careful about who we tell." She nodded, understanding the weight of their discovery. The Temporal Observation Project was funded by the United Earth Coalition, a government that had emerged from the ashes of the resource wars with a mandate to prevent future catastrophes. If disasters were indeed messages from the future, it would revolutionize everything humanity understood about causality, free will, and their place in the cosmos. Elena pulled up historical footage of the 2023 European heatwave, the images grainy but haunting. Thousands had died as temperatures soared to unprecedented levels, power grids failed, and infrastructure crumbled. The quantum signature around that event pulsed with the same frequency as every subsequent climate disaster. "Run a predictive analysis," she instructed the AI system. "If this pattern holds, where would the next warning appear?" The hologram shifted, calculations streaming past in ribbons of light. When it stabilized, both scientists stepped back in shock. The prediction pointed to their present moment, 2157. And the location marker centered directly on their laboratory. "That's impossible," James repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. Elena's hands trembled as she accessed the building's environmental sensors. Everything appeared normal until she reached the quantum flux detectors installed to monitor their temporal equipment. The readings showed a massive buildup of the same energy signature they'd identified in historical disasters. "James," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I think we're about to become one of those warnings." The laboratory's emergency lighting suddenly activated, bathing everything in pulsing red. The main computer's voice, usually calm and measured, crackled with static. "Quantum cascade failure detected. Temporal containment breach imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately." But Elena couldn't move. On the main display, new data was streaming in, not from the past, but from the future. Images, sensor readings, and voice recordings from what appeared to be the aftermath of their current moment. She saw herself, older and battle-scarred, speaking into a recording device with desperate urgency. "If you're receiving this," her future self said, "then the cascade has begun." The disasters weren't random. They were breadcrumbs, leading us to this moment. The entity that's been sending these warnings needs us to understand. Humanity's greatest test isn't behind us. It's about to begin. Hashtag Chapter 2. The revelation, the evacuation alarm screamed through the corridors of the Temporal Research Institute as Elena and James raced through the chaos. Scientists and technicians fled past them, some clutching data tablets, others empty-handed in their panic. The quantum cascade was growing stronger, reality itself seeming to ripple around the edges of their vision. The archive. Elena shouted over the alarm. "We need to get to the historical archive before the building seals." James grabbed her arm. "Elena, we need to leave. The containment protocols will activate in minutes." She pulled free, her eyes blazing with determination. "Don't you understand? This is exactly what happened before. Every disaster, every warning, people ran instead of listening. We can't make the same mistake." They reached the archive level just as the emergency blast doors began their slow descent. Elena dove through the narrowing gap, James reluctantly following. The chamber beyond was vast, filled with rows of quantum storage units containing humanity's complete historical record. "Computer," Elena called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Display all data related to temporal anomalies in recorded human disasters." The air shimmered, and suddenly they were surrounded by a three-dimensional timeline of human history. Every major catastrophe glowed with the same blue energy signature. The Black Death, the industrial accidents of the 19th century, both world wars, the nuclear incidents, the climate disasters, and dozens of smaller events they'd never connected before. "My God," James whispered, "they're all connected. But how? And by what?" Elena walked through the holographic timeline, her scientific mind racing. "Look at the pattern. Each disaster teaches a specific lesson. The Black Death led to advances in medicine and public health. The industrial accidents drove safety regulations. The world wars sparked international cooperation efforts. The climate disasters forced the development of sustainable technology." James finished, understanding dawning in his voice. But who or what has that kind of foresight? What entity could orchestrate events across centuries? The answer came from an unexpected source. The archive's quantum storage suddenly activated, data streaming from units that should have been dormant. Ancient files materialized in the air around them, documents from before the resource wars, from before the great collapse of 2089, from civilizations that predated recorded history. One file expanded before Elena's eyes, revealing text in a script that shifted and changed as she read it, as if the language itself was evolving to communicate across the barriers of time and culture. Asterisk, "We are the echoes of tomorrow, the voices of what could be. We exist in the space between possibility and certainty, in the quantum foam where potential futures intersect with present choices. We have watched civilizations rise and fall, make the same mistakes in endless cycles. But humanity shows promise. You learn. You adapt. You grow. Asterisk, asterisk. Each disaster we've whispered into your timeline carries a lesson. Each tragedy teaches resilience. Each warning builds wisdom. But the final test approaches, not of your technology or your courage, but of your unity. The cascade you've triggered is not an accident. It is the moment we've been preparing you for. Asterisk, asterisk. Beyond your solar system, forces gather that would see all consciousness extinguished. They are coming, drawn by the very signals of intelligence that mark advanced civilizations. But you are not defenseless. Every lesson learned from every disaster has prepared you for this moment. The choice is yours. Heed the warnings and unite, or join the countless silent worlds in the darkness between stars. Elena staggered back, the weight of the revelation crushing. James caught her as her legs gave out, both of them staring at the impossible message floating before them. "It's real," she breathed. "All of it. The disasters, the warnings, the pattern. It's all been preparation for an invasion." The building shuddered around them as the quantum cascade reached critical mass. But instead of destruction, something else was happening. The temporal energy was forming a bubble around the research institute, separating it from normal spacetime. Through the archive's windows, they could see the outside world flickering between different time periods. One moment it was their familiar 2157. The next it showed the resource wars of the 2040s, then the climate disasters of the early 21st century, then scenes from an ancient past where primitive humans first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. "We're unstuck in time," James said with scientific wonder overriding his fear. "The cascade isn't destroying us. It's liberating us from linear temporality." Elena pulled herself upright, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Then we can do what the echoes have been doing. We can send warnings, influence events, prepare humanity for what's coming." But even as she spoke, new data was streaming into the archive. Star charts, sensor readings, and tactical analyses from futures yet to come. The invasion the echoes had warned about wasn't a distant possibility. It was already happening, scattered across multiple timelines as the enemy tested humanity's responses. "Elena," James said quietly, pointing to one particular data stream. "Look at this." The display showed Earth as it existed in their present timeline of 2157. Peaceful, rebuilt, sustainable. Then it shifted to show the same world just days in the future, burning under alien weapons. Its carefully reconstructed cities reduced to ash. The attack comes soon, Elena realized. But we know about it now. We can warn people, prepare them. But will they listen? James asked, echoing the doubt that had plagued every warning throughout history. How many disasters could have been prevented if people had heeded the signs? Elena looked around at the quantum archive, at the collected wisdom of human civilization, at the message from entities that existed outside of time itself. "They'll listen," she said with growing conviction, "because this time we're not just warning them about the disaster. We're showing them how to win." Hashtag Act 2. The War Beyond Time, hashtag Chapter 3. The first warning 3 days earlier, from the perspective of normal time. Colonel Sarah Martinez was reviewing routine patrol reports at the Mars Defense Station when the impossible happened. Every communication array in the solar system simultaneously received the same message, not through radio waves or quantum entanglement, but directly into the minds of every sentient being within range. Asterisk. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Temporal Research Institute. I am speaking to you from outside normal time. An invasion force approaches our solar system. They will arrive in 72 hours. This is not a drill. Activate all emergency protocols immediately. Sarah's first instinct was to dismiss it as some kind of elaborate hoax or psychological warfare. But then the technical data began streaming in: ship configurations, weapon specifications, tactical analyses that were impossibly detailed and disturbingly plausible. "Sir," Lieutenant Torres called from a communication station. "We're getting confirmation from Luna Base, Jupiter Station, and the Outer Rim colonies. They all received the same transmission." Sarah pulled up the tactical display, her military mind already shifting into crisis mode. Any sign of actual invasion forces on long-range sensors? Negative, Colonel. Space is clear out to the heliosphere. But Torres hesitated. The quantum detection arrays are picking up some kind of massive disturbance beyond Pluto's orbit. Something big is coming, and it's not showing up on conventional sensors. In her quarters that night, Sarah stared out at the rust-colored landscape of Mars and tried to make sense of what was happening. The technical data from the temporal message was being analyzed by Earth's best military scientists, and their preliminary reports were terrifying. The invasion force was described as using weapons that could manipulate space-time itself, turning the laws of physics into instruments of war. But what troubled her most was the personal message that had followed the general warning, a private communication that only she had received. Sarah, this is Elena. I know we've never met, but in the timeline I'm observing, you become crucial to humanity's survival. Your decisions in the coming days will determine whether our species has a future. Trust your instincts, question everything, and remember that sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when not to fight. #hashtag Chapter 4. The Resistance Forms Dr. Elena Vasquez, the version trapped outside normal time, watched through the quantum foam as her warning rippled across human civilization. In some timelines, the governments responded swiftly, mobilizing defenses and evacuating population centers. In others, bureaucratic inaction and disbelief led to catastrophic unpreparedness. But the timeline she was most concerned with was her own, the one where the final battle would be decided. Through her expanded temporal perception, Elena could see the invasion force as it truly was. Not ships in the conventional sense, but living constructs that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They were ancient, older than human civilization, and they had consumed countless worlds by turning each species' greatest strengths against them. James, she called to her research partner, who was cataloging the temporal echoes of human disasters. I need you to see this. The archive's holographic display shifted to show Earth's history from the invader's perspective. Every human conflict, every technological breakthrough, every moment of progress was being analyzed and cataloged by the approaching entities. They're learning from our past, James realized. Every war we've fought, every disaster we've survived, they're using it to predict how we'll respond to the invasion. Elena nodded grimly. But that's also their weakness. They're assuming we'll follow historical patterns. They don't understand that we've been prepared for this moment. She reached out with her expanded consciousness, touching the minds of key figures across human space. Colonel Martinez on Mars, Prime Minister Chin on Earth, Admiral Okafor commanding the Jupiter fleet. To each, she sent not just information, but understanding. The deep knowledge that this battle was the culmination of everything humanity had learned from its darkest moments. On Earth, Prime Minister Chun stood before the Emergency Council of the United Earth Coalition. The message from the future had thrown the global government into chaos. But Chun had lived through the resource wars and understood that some threats required unprecedented unity. The data has been verified by our best scientists, he announced to the assembled leaders. The invasion force will arrive in 48 hours. We have that long to implement a defense strategy that has never been attempted in human history. Minister Rodriguez of the South American Federation raised her hand. What strategy? Our weapons are designed to fight other humans, not entities that can manipulate time and space. Chun activated the holographic display, showing the plan that had been transmitted along with Elena's warning. We don't fight them with weapons. We fight them with something they can't predict or counter. Our ability to choose differently than our history suggests we should. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of meeting the invasion with military force, humanity would respond with what the aliens had never encountered, a species that could break its own patterns, that could learn from its mistakes and choose cooperation over competition, wisdom over fear. Every human settlement will simultaneously broadcast every lesson we've learned from every disaster in our history, Chin explained. Not as information, but as lived experience, transmitted through the same temporal channels the invaders used to analyze us. We'll overwhelm their predictive algorithms with the one thing they can't compute: our capacity for growth. Hashtag Chapter 5. The battle for tomorrow. Colonel Martinez stood in the command center of the Mars Defense Station as the first enemy constructs materialized at the edge of the solar system. They appeared as wounds in space itself, tears in reality through which impossible geometries emerged. All stations report ready, Lieutenant Torres announced. The Earth Coalition confirms the transmission will begin in 60 seconds. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the approaching invasion force. In any conventional scenario, humanity would be doomed. The enemy possessed technology that made human weapons look like stone tools. But this wasn't a conventional scenario. Begin transmission, she ordered. Across human space, every communication array, every quantum transmitter, every device capable of broadcasting information activated simultaneously. But instead of sending radio waves or data packets, they transmitted something far more profound: the collective memory of human experience. From Earth came the lessons of the 2023 heat wave, not as historical data, but as lived experience. The suffering, the solidarity, the innovations born from desperation. The memory of neighbors helping neighbors, of communities coming together in crisis, of the technological breakthroughs that emerged from necessity. From the Mars colonies came the story of survival in a hostile environment, of humans learning to thrive where no life should exist. From the asteroid mining stations came tales of cooperation in the face of cosmic isolation. From the Jupiter system came accounts of humanity's first steps toward becoming a truly spacefaring species. But most importantly, from a temporal research station existing outside normal time, came Elena's final message. Not a warning this time, but a revelation. We are not the same species that fled our dying homeworld centuries ago. We are not the same civilization that nearly destroyed itself in resource wars. We are not even the same beings who first looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone. We are the children of disaster and the siblings of hope. We are what emerges when intelligence learns to embrace its failures as foundations for wisdom. The invading entities, existing partially outside time, suddenly found themselves flooded with temporal information they had never encountered. Every prediction their vast intelligence had made about human behavior was simultaneously correct and completely wrong. Humans had indeed followed historical patterns, but only long enough to learn how to transcend them. Elena, watching from her position outside normal spacetime, saw the exact moment when the invasion force realized what was happening. The entities had consumed countless civilizations, but they had always faced species trapped in their own historical patterns, doomed to repeat the same mistakes that had led to their discovery. Humanity was different. The disasters that should have weakened them had instead taught them resilience. The conflicts that should have divided them had ultimately led to greater unity. The warnings from the future had been heeded not because humans were naturally wise, but because they had learned wisdom through suffering. The invasion constructs began to destabilize as their predictive systems overloaded. They existed by consuming civilizations that followed deterministic patterns, but humanity had achieved something truly alien to them: genuine growth, genuine change, genuine hope. One by one, the tears in space began to seal themselves. The entities retreated not in defeat, but in confusion. They had encountered something that their ancient intelligence couldn't process: a species that could be both utterly predictable and completely surprising. Hashtag Act 3. The echo continues. Hashtag Chapter 6. The new dawn 6 months after the invasion that never truly began, Elena Vasquez found herself back in normal time, standing in the rebuilt Temporal Research Institute. The quantum cascade that had trapped her outside linear temporality had subsided. leaving behind technology that would revolutionize human understanding of cause and effect. But more importantly, it had left behind proof that the future was not fixed, that warnings could be heeded, and that growth was possible even for entities that considered themselves beyond change. "The readings are fascinating," James said, studying the residual temporal signatures from the invasion. "The entities didn't actually retreat. They evolved, changed their entire approach to how they interact with younger civilizations. We didn't just survive the invasion. We transformed our would-be destroyers into something else entirely." Through the laboratory windows, she could see the bustling spaceport where human ships departed daily for new worlds. The crisis had accelerated humanity's expansion into the galaxy, not through military conquest, but through a new kind of exploration, one based on the principle that every encounter with the unknown was an opportunity for mutual growth. The echoes from tomorrow had fallen silent, their warnings no longer necessary. Humanity had learned to generate its own guidance system, to treat each disaster as a teacher and each crisis as a catalyst for positive change. Chapter 7. Ripples in Time. Colonel Martinez, now Admiral Martinez, commanding the newly formed Temporal Defense Corps, reviewed reports from across human space. The technology developed during the invasion crisis had opened new frontiers, not just in space, but in time itself. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we're detecting temporal signatures from the Kepler system. It appears another species is facing the same kind of crisis we encountered." Martinez smiled, remembering Elena's words about the courage to know when not to fight. "Prepare a message pod with our complete historical database. Include every disaster, every warning, every lesson we've learned. And add a note, from one echo to another, the future is what you make of it." The message pod launched, carrying humanity's story across the cosmos, not as conquerors or saviors, but as fellow travelers who had learned that the greatest victory was helping others avoid the need for battle entirely. Chapter 8. The eternal echo. Elena stood before the United Earth Coalition's Council, delivering her final report on the Temporal Defense Project. Behind her, holographic displays showed a galaxy where former invasion entities had become guardians of younger civilizations, where the pattern of consumption and destruction had been replaced by one of guidance and growth. "The entity we knew as the echoes from tomorrow," she concluded, "was never separate from us. It was us, our potential future selves, reaching back through time to ensure that potential became reality. We are all echoes from tomorrow, warnings from what could be, guides for what should be." In the audience, representatives from dozens of human colonies listened with the attention of a species that had learned the value of heeding warnings. But more than that, they listened with the wisdom of a civilization that had discovered its true purpose in the cosmos, not to dominate or consume, but to help other forms of consciousness learn and grow. As Elena concluded her presentation, she felt a familiar sensation, the touch of minds from outside normal time. But these weren't warnings from the future anymore. They were expressions of gratitude from civilizations across the galaxy who had received humanity's gift of hard-won wisdom. The echo continued, rippling outward through space and time, carrying a simple message. Intelligence could choose compassion, growth was always possible, and the future belonged to those brave enough to learn from their past. In the end, humanity's greatest disaster had been its isolation, the belief that they were alone in a hostile universe. And their greatest triumph had been the discovery that connection, understanding, and mutual growth were not just possible but inevitable, once consciousness chose wisdom over fear. The warnings from tomorrow had become invitations to a better today, and the echo of human growth continued to spread across the cosmos, transforming disasters into teachers and enemies into allies, one choice at a time. Epilogue. The continuous echo years later, Elena Vasquez would often return to the rebuilt memorial where the original temporal laboratory had stood. The site had become a place of reflection, where humanity remembered not just the crisis they had survived, but the transformation it had enabled. Visitors from across the galaxy came to study the exhibits that detailed humanity's journey from a species defined by its disasters to one defined by its growth. Each display told the same essential story, that consciousness, when faced with the choice between repeating old patterns and creating new ones, possessed the remarkable ability to transcend its own limitations. Children played in the memorial gardens while their parents and grandparents, representing dozens of different species, shared stories of their own homeworld struggles and triumphs. The echo had become a conversation, and the conversation had become a civilization built on the foundation that every ending was also a beginning. Elena smiled, watching a young human girl explain to her alien playmate how Earth's ancient disasters had taught humanity to listen for warnings from the future. The child understood intuitively what had taken Elena decades to discover. That time was not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean where every choice created ripples that could reach any shore. As the twin suns of the colony world set behind the memorial, Elena felt the familiar touch of consciousness from beyond the present moment. Not warnings this time, but gratitude, the acknowledgement from countless future civilizations that the echo continued, that the lessons learned from humanity's darkest hours had become beacons of hope for species not yet born. The disasters had been warnings, but they had also been gifts. Each tragedy had carried within it the seed of wisdom, and humanity had learned to plant those seeds in the rich soil of choice, growing forests of possibility where once only desolation had existed. The echo from tomorrow had become the voice of today, and today's voice would become tomorrow's echo, carrying the eternal message that growth, understanding, and hope were not just possible but inevitable for any consciousness brave enough to listen to the warnings and wise enough to change. And in the growing darkness of the alien evening, the stars themselves seemed to pulse with the rhythm of that eternal echo, a cosmic heartbeat reminding all who would listen that the future was always, and had always been, a choice.